chiming in. If you see someone in the chat, say hello. We love having people from across the country. Some of our webinars have people from around the world. And we're here today to talk about a very important topic. Right. So, I talk about one of the things we're going to get to is how we are almost getting tired of talking about this one. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. So let me tell you about our time together. We're here for the presentation is going to be about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. And then we have lots of time for questions and answers. Use the Q&A button. We want to hear from you. This is such an important topic. There's almost like this continuum, like this excited still about it, but there's frustration around engagement, and there's also a sense of futility. So welcome to those who are joining. We see people still coming in, lots of people representing from Ontario and Manitoba today. So let me tell you what we're going to talk about. We are going to, and I want to thank everybody for being here because we know that you're busy. We love having you here. We love to have you engaged. We're discussing engagement, but not just employee engagement, but are surveys making it worse? We're gonna ask you some questions. So get ready on the chat because I love to hear from you on some of these questions. We're gonna shift into what humans need. So why are we still struggling with this? How long have we been struggling with it? And how can we simplify this situation to start getting it righter? How can we make engagement surveys or the processes connected to them better so that we can get to some solutions and improve meaningful work for everybody, for all of us, right? So welcome. So let me ask you this question. I want us, overall employee engagement has tanked. It's plummeted for a number of years. But I want to ask everybody in the chat. I see people using the chat. How long do you think we've been chasing this thing called motivation and performance? I want to see in the chat. So how long do you think we've been chasing what we're calling, motivation and performance, improving productivity? I want to see in the chat, how many years do you think we've been? Has it been a decade? Has it been 2 decades? We've got someone says since the dawn of time. That's a long time. 5 years, 20 years, forever. Okay, Brendan K is the closest so far. The dawn of time, a little bit too far. But this is what's wild when you look at it. 113 years. So 113 years we've been actually chasing motivation. The Principle of Scientific Management by Frederick Taylor was written in 1911. So the concern for productivity and motivation has been on the radar since the turn of the century. There's the Hawthorne experiments of the electric company just outside of Chicago, was looking into, so you've heard of the Hawthorne principle, right? 1920s. Now, over the last few years, and I love the chat. I love people are chatting back and forth since the Industrial Revolution. Thanks, Jeff Delaney. 25 years times 4, right? So why do you think we know more about it than ever? We know more about engagement than ever. We've collected more data. We've spent trillions of dollars on it. Why do you think we're not getting engagement right? What are your thoughts? I want to see it in the chat. What are your thoughts on how come we're not getting this right? Over 100 years, and we're still not getting it right. What are some of your thoughts on why we might still be struggling with engagement? Now, if you want some sources, you can go to any think tank, your favorites. There's a lot. People have said burnout. So burnout's a big issue. Some people say it's the Great Resignation, right? We never talk to the actual workers, Wyman says. Awesome. Okay, so many, keep it going. I love these answers in the chat. We've been having hundreds of conversations. Now, I'm not going to ask you this question, because Brivia has been asking hundreds of people, probably 1,000 over the last 3 years. We've been asking the question, are you satisfied with your engagement survey or your engagement approach? Now look at the great chat, right? Lack of follow through, lack of getting people's voices, putting people in widgets, treating them like, okay, awesome, good stuff. So hundreds of conversations. And we ask people, are you satisfied? And some people do this, and we haven't heard anybody say that they're satisfied. Now, that's a problem already, because the question should be, are you excited about your engagement survey and your approach to elevating the human experience at work, right? So we've been doing it for so long. We've been saying at Brivia, we're not survey fatigued, we're disappointment fatigued. Now, I want you to know, everybody, there's lots of hope here today. Okay, one of the things that we're going to try to do is simplify this complicated. Now, we're not going to, even at Brivia, we say it's not, we've complicated it, Humans are complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. So we're going to get to some really simple solutions here. And we think put our finger on one of the reasons or some of the reasons why we think we haven't been able to chase this elusive, this mysterious thing we call engagement, and why it's been going down for so long. And even worse, how surveys can make the situation worse off. Now, we talk about disappointment fatigue. We're not survey fatigued. We're disappointment fatigued. Now, people talk about disappointment, but one of the things we say at Brivia is if we're not careful, it's going to go beyond disappointment, right? It's going to move into disillusionment, right? How many times are we going to be asked to do something or asked to participate in something and feel like there's no action taken, or feel like we haven't been heard, or feel like we really can't see the results that we want? So I almost say that disappointment is a gift compared to what might happen, because we believe at Brivia, if we continue down this road for another decade or two, right, with the kind of results, the way that we're measuring and managing engagement, we may actually have a negative impact on not just our disappointment, but our physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual well-being, right? So one of the things that we talk about at Brivia quite a bit, and if you've been here, we see some of our partners here, is, and I'm glad that you're here. And the reason why I'm so glad that you're here is because we're still trying to do something about it. We still want to do something about this. Now, we don't talk about engagement at Brivia. We talk about something called optimal human functioning, right? Engagement, I'll talk to at the end why we think if we're measuring engagement, we actually might be measuring the wrong thing or showing up too late. So we talk about optimal human functioning at Brivia. And it's usually this optimal human functioning and performance, according to the work that we do, is, and you felt this, you know the stuff that I'm talking about. It's where you feel high energy, where your focus is sharp, where your level of commitment is abundant and your effort is incredible, right? You've had days and weeks and months at work over the years where you've felt like that. Now, we've called it engagement. Now, we're going to get into some of the things that we think that contribute to it. And I want you to connect to your experience. I want to see this in the chat, right? Some people say, well, what's the research on this? And one of the things I like to say is you be the research. I don't think you need to tell anybody or, to hear from anybody else about what makes you perform better, what makes you motivated, what gets you engaged at work. So let's simplify this. Let's bring it down to three things. And I want to hear what you think about this. According to our work at Brivia, and some of you have seen something like this. Now there's variations. I like threes, I like alliterations, and I'm going to introduce, I haven't introduced these three alliterations yet. So you've probably heard of safe, significant, situated, the core four, the 3 R's. One of the things that we really believe contributes to high levels of performance and optimal functioning are 3 things. And you tell me if I'm wrong. I want to see in the chat. I want to see if this makes sense, if this resonates with you. The first one is matter, right? That we feel that we matter, right? We feel that our efforts and our contributions matter, right? That they're valued, okay? We know at Brivia that when we feel that we matter as employees, but even more as human beings, we're actually doing really well. So that's one element, all right? The next element that we think is really important, and we talk about this all the time, as a matter of fact, Brivia stands for by way of meaning. And one of the things that we know is that when you're experiencing meaning at work, now some people jump to, oh, well, it's about purpose, it's about values. Well, yeah, meaning is a whole bunch of things, but we simplify meaning to be that to some degree, work fulfills one of 4 things. Your work fulfills either your needs, your values, your goals, or your strengths. And the really cool thing is when work fulfills all 4 of those, we call those the core 4, you're functioning really well. You're performing optimally, right? So engagement, absolutely you're engaged. So matter, meaning, and manageability. That's the third one. Manageability. What does manageability mean? Well, manageability is that we perceive that we have the capability and the resources to do what's expected of us, to accomplish what's required. Okay. So here's one of the things. This is simple, right? I want to, in the chat, let me see. Have you ever felt all 3 of these at work? Right? And which one's more important to you? Let me see this in the chat. Which one would you say is more important to you as a human working? Is it that you matter? Is it that your work is meaningful? Is it that the workload or the work that you're doing is manageable? What would you pick one, or are they all important? Okay. According to our work at Brivia, all of them are important, right? And what we're starting to see, right? What does this have to do? Okay, I'm seeing in the chat, right? Meaning, Francine, awesome, right? So it's what's really neat that we're seeing in our work is that, and here comes the sad part, right? Okay, awesome. Look at the chat. Really good stuff. All of them are important for sure, right? You agree with these. Manageability. Okay, cool. Neat stuff, right? Yeah. So what's really neat, and if you see in the chat, some people are talking about recognition, right? Appreciation. That would fall in the matter bucket. Some people are identifying that, it's important that their values are being aligned or that they're meeting their goals. That would fall in the meaningful bucket, right? Workload, schedule, getting things accomplished would fall into the manageability bucket. So one of the great things is we need each of these, but when we have all three of these, we are feeling and doing super well. So let's get back to, well, what does surveys have to do this? Let's get back to why we're here. How has surveys made this more difficult? Well, we believe that surveys kind of go against the way that they're structured, the way that the process is being used, the way that the experience is being created. We believe that currently many, and I don't want to say if yours is not compromising matter, meaning, and manageability, awesome. That's good. But we believe that most of them are. So let's make this even more simple, because some people say, Steve, like meaning and matter and manageability, that's like kind of that really deep stuff. Well, let's talk about three things that you know really well, and they line up with matter, meaning, and manageability. You know these words, right? And they're connected. Simple, practical, and actionable. Now, they're not the same thing. Sometimes simple, practical, and actionable get put in the same bucket. They're not. I'm going to differentiate them just right away. Just they're slightly different. And it's important to know the differences because sometimes things can be simple, but they're not practical. Sometimes something can be practical, but it's not simple. And sometimes it can be actionable, but it's not at all simple or practical, right? So let's break this down. And I'm going to show how this overlays with meaning, matter, and manageability. So let's get to simple. What does it mean? Simple is just about, it's easy to understand, right? It's about clarity and it's about being totally straightforward. That's what simple is. Practical is about it's realistic, it's achievable, it's feasible, it's applicable. So practical is about it being relevant and relatable to our real life situation or to our work situation. So you see how those two things are different. Now, actionable is about getting the desired outcomes that we want. Right? Here's the other thing that we know about humans. We need these three things as well, right? To be able to feel good, to do good. At first glance, like I said, they seem like the same thing. And actually, I saw in the chat that manageability covers all of this. And actually, when we talk about simple, practical, and actionable at Brivia, we talk about having a spa day, right? SPA. Every day should be a spa day. So what's neat about this is it overlaps with not just manageability, because automatically when we talk about manageability, a lot of people think, well, it's about simple, practical, and actionable. Well, true. Simple is really about manageable, right? So if simple is, this is how it overlays with what humans need. And then we're going to talk about how surveys and some processes actually undermine what we need as humans to feel good, to do good. So simple is often manageable. It's usually meaningful, right? Because it's about, it's relatable. So when things are practical, we can relate to them. They're relevant. They're meaningful. They're valuable to our work, to what we're doing. So simple overlaps with manageable, practical overlaps with meaningful, and actionable overlaps with matter. Now, this is interesting. I would love to hear, right? People ask me about research all the time. Now, all three of these are important, but when they come together, when we experience simple, practical, and actionable, we also experience matter, meaning, and manageability. Now, if you're feeling like this is like complicated, we're overthinking it. Let me ask you, when I say actions at the heart of the matter, I want you to think about your own experience, okay? I'm guessing everybody here has been in a relationship before, okay? Because sometimes people play down action, right? So let me ask you to think about your experience. You do not have to give any details. I'd love to see it in the chat. Think about a time when you were in a relationship. It could either be a work relationship or a relationship outside of work, right? And you experienced no action after the following statements. Okay, you ready for this? The statements are, you are important to me. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. Have you ever been in a situation where you heard those words and there was no action? Okay. Okay. So I love it. Jeff had a great question in the chat. So I'm just getting to this right now, Jeff. So how unpacking this actionable. So look what in the chat gift, right? So action, when we have the words, you're important, with no action. When we have the words, I'm sorry, I won't do that again, without the action, it has a direct impact on our experience of whether we matter or not. Jeff, I'm hoping that's helpful. Okay. Now it's an easy, it's a, it's an easy, and this is why when people say, they say, oh, I told so-and-so I was going to be there, I didn't show up, they're going to be okay with it. I say, no, we'll just stop right now and call, because there's I think it's, Meister Eichhardt, I think it is. I'll have to check on it. Or Eichhardt Meister, one of the two. Yeah, without action, it's dangerous. I can't remember the quote. Maybe I'll get to it. I hope that was helpful, Jeff. So when we talk about why are these having such an impact, right? Right. You've been both sides of the conversation. Great. Here's one I always say to people. You want research, right? You want research. If you've ever been in a relationship and you've heard somebody say that they love you and their actions were incongruent with that, it's not long. And that's why I call it the heart of the matter. Because when there's no action, right? Oh, it's Meister Eckhart. Here it comes. It's the price of inaction is far greater than taking no action. Okay. All right. And see, this is where they're overlapped, because what's really interesting is when things aren't manageable, it's not long before we can't keep up, right? So if you think about it, it doesn't matter. Humans are resilient, but if something isn't manageable, it really doesn't matter if it's meaningful or matter. Like I say to people, I'm getting crushed, but at least it's by the things that I love. Well, getting crushed is still getting crushed. Right? When things are not meaningful, it's not long. Like when our work's not meaningful, it is not long before our energy goes down, our focus gets a bit scattered or less sharp, right? Our commitment wavers and our effort decreases. And well, I think most of us can relate to this. When we really don't feel like we matter, nothing much does, right? So let's get back to this. How do surveys, because that's what we're here to talk about, because this is all about engagement and the human element. Well, let's talk about most surveys and most approaches that have been developed around, the employee engagement survey or the employee experience survey. And here's some truth. Most of them are not simple, right? You can share your experience in the chat, right? Remember, we've asked 1,000 people over the last 3 years, are you satisfied with your approach? And are you getting, more importantly, as I said, it should be, are you excited? But more importantly, we're asking, are you getting the results that you want over the last, say, 6 cycles? Right? And what we're hearing from a lot of people, is they say no, and they're not. And one of 3 things is happening. For some, they're chasing variability. Like it just keeps changing from measurement to measurement. And it's hard to get on top of what's going on to understand it. The second one is it's stagnant, or it just hasn't changed. And in many cases, employee engagement has gone down. So some of the processes that we're using, some of the tools that we've been using, right? Some engagement surveys, they're not practical. They're lengthy. They have many questions. They can be time consuming. They can be expensive. And sometimes the questions, are so complex, or the tool so complex, it requires an in-house consultant or an in-house expert to try to interpret the results. What about practical? Well, many of the questions are lengthy. Some of them don't make sense. Because they're expensive, some of the tools, the questions, it can be not used as often, which makes it less relevant. It also requires us to, if it's expensive and time consuming, we are sometimes encouraged to do it less, which means once a year or once every 2 years. This definitely affects getting in tune with what the experience of the people are. and most of them are not actionable. Now, I don't want to put down anybody. If anybody has a tool that you're using that goes against what we're talking about, awesome. We'd love to hear about it, right? Many of the engagement surveys or the processes that come with them are not actionable. But there's lots of action. Most of us, there's tons of action. People are taking action. We're talking to them all the time. They're trying to get on top of this engagement thing. The efforts are there, but we're not getting the results that we desire. So what does this mean? Well, when it's not simple, when it's not practical, and when it's not actionable, it leaves all sorts of room for interpretation. It leaves all sorts of room for assumptions. And in many cases, it leads to a couple of things where they're stopped altogether or they're not done as regularly. Okay. And that presents two really big barriers, because I think people have already said this in the chat. We're going to get to solutions right away. We're going to get to some solutions. So here comes the hope, right? We already saw it in the chat. The most important thing is that we get to the experience of the employee. We hear their story because it holds the information, it holds the solutions that we need. But when it's not simple, not practical, not actionable, it actually becomes an impediment to these things. Okay. All right. So there is good news, and I want to open it up to questions. Okay. Are these, so there's some great questions in the chat already. I see, are these like cost, quality, and time? Yeah, where one can come at the expense of the other. Absolutely. Absolutely. It could sometimes be one or the other, Phil, right? And sometimes it could be a combination of those, right? And as we like to say at Brivia, they're inextricably linked, almost like the diagram I showed with the matter, meaning, and manageability, right? Individually, they're important. Simple, practical, actionable. Individually, they're important, but they all affect each other, right? And if we can get all three or get close to three of them better, we're going to be doing better. Okay, great questions. Keep the questions coming. I don't know if there's any in the question and answer period, but we're gonna get to that. So, what do? There's good news, and one of my favorite quotes this week is from our CEO John Hossack, and I thought I'd use it. There is hope in the hypothesis. Right? I love it so much. I wrote it in my quote book. And what we're talking about is there's hope in the hypothesis that if we can improve well-being, if we really can improve matter, if we can really improve a meaningful experience, if we can really improve that feeling that things are manageable and we can do this, well, then we're going to improve not only productivity, not only the stuff that we talk about, engagement and performance, we're going to improve resilience and we're going to improve well-being. Now, in business, this is important. In the health and human services, it's critical, because when we're doing better, the people that we care for are doing better. So where is the hope? Well, let's look at some of the solutions. What can we do? Right? What can we do? Well, most people, if you're not doing anything yet, well, inaction is not good, right? So if you are doing something, one of the things that we can look at is our approach, right? Does our approach result in feeling like we matter? Right? Is our approach resulting in, do we feel that we matter? Do people get excited about it? Do they feel that their input is valued or valuable? If the answer is maybe or no to this, we've got to do something about it. Does it create an experience that's meaningful? Remember, we're talking about meaningful. Does it overlap with the employee needs, with their values, with their goals, and with their strengths? One or more of those. If we can get all four of them, great. But we just need one of them. Is the action, can we take action? Are there actionable items that are doable out of our approach? If the answer is maybe or no, we've got to look at that. I have an exciting solution to show just coming up. So if you're not into the matter, meaning, and manageability, and that feels too lofty, then let's break it down to those other three things. What aspects of our approach can we make simple? Can we simplify it further? Can we make it less questions? Can we get people more involved? How can we make this as simple as possible? Can we make it more practical? And remember, if you go back to the definitions, practical is about relevance, relatability, right? And helping us solve a problem, right? Which leads to actionable. Can we make or take meaningful action on these results, right? So what we're suggesting, okay, not a total overhaul, right? Because there's some people that we talk to. Now, if you're locked into a process that you know in your heart isn't working, right? Which we talk to a lot of people. And the predominant answer, honestly, I know Brenda's on the line. I know some other people that we work with are online. I don't think I've heard anybody say, yes, we're totally satisfied. Which brings me to, and I want to hear your questions and comments. I want to hear your questions and comments on engagement, on employee surveys, on the stuff that we presented. But one of the things, and this I want to just quickly discuss, is that if you're here and you think that what we're talking about sharing in the chat and presenting on is meaningful, and you're not sure where to start, what we have done at Brivia is we have created a tool based on all of the things that we have talked about. It's taken about 25 years to develop, and it's super simple, right? I'm just checking my notes and checking the time here because I want to hear your questions. It's called the M3, most meaningful measures. And as a matter of fact, just to make it super simple, we actually lined up all of the things that kind of frustrated us about engagement surveys and different types of employee experience surveys and processes, and created one that was as simple, as practical, and as actionable as possible. And the M3, what it does is it's a tool that encourages us to measure matter, meaning, and manageability. Most importantly, where employees are finding meaning in their work and where they're not. And even more importantly, that is, what do they identify as meaning indicators that could elevate their experience at work? And the good news about this, because action is one of the most important elements in that whole process, because remember, Jeff, action is at the heart of matter, right? At the heart of the matter is that we have created a step-by-step, almost a paint-by-numbers approach for leaders to take the information and take action, take meaningful action on it instantly. So it's called the M3. And here's the great news, is everybody that's here today and signed up, and I said there's about 200, almost 250 people that have signed up. We are going to send you the link to the overview, and we're also going to send you a PDF of the M3 just so you can read about it and learn about it. And at Brivia, we love to help. We're here to help. This is something that we say we're on this continuum with engagement and surveys and employee experience tools. It feels like it's frustration, which we're still bothered by it. And we're trying and we're trying. And unfortunately, on the other end, it's futility. And people are saying things like, it doesn't matter. It's not going to work. And when we get to that point, it doesn't matter. We're actually talking about something that matters the most. We must get to the experience of our employees. We must learn about what's most meaningful to them. What do they feel like they matter? And what are the areas that we can look at? And what kind of action can we take to make their experience more manageable? So those are some of the hints to the solutions. We have a solution, but I'd love to hear from you. If you would like to stay in touch, we're jumping into questions and answers, which are my favorite parts of the webinar. We have started the Getting to Better newsletter. We're going to start a Getting to Better community that's going to be free, with free stuff and community engagement. So please join us. You can take a picture of that QR code with your phone and join the Getting to Better community. Join the newsletter. So this is among my favorite times during the webinar, is to answer questions or to take comments. I'll invite Brenda, if she's there, to jump in if there's been any questions in the question and answers, or if she has any questions that come up through the chat that I can respond to. All right, so it's now open. Questions, comments, and again, at Brivia, we love hearing questions and comments that, that didn't make sense, or, explain that. Could you give another example, right? It does not always have to be, this is awesome, this is great. Any questions or comments, folks? And Brenda, did you catch any questions or comments along the way? All right, it's awfully quiet here. I'm going to the... Okay, awesome. Here we go. We got some questions. Are engagement surveys best administered by third parties versus in-house HR team? What a great question. And that comes from Steve. Steve, great question. It's what you want to do is create safety. So the first way is we have to ask, what difference does a third party make, right? So if we get right down to it, How helpful is having a third party? And often the number one comment we hear is confidentiality. Well, that makes us think, do we have a problem with safety in our company, right? If people, so we start with what's most safe, Steve. We want to get in-house, right? We want to, one of the reasons why we built the M3 and we encourage, tools that get right to the heart and the truth of employee experience is because we want to encourage conversations. We want to have a tool that gets real, relevant, relatable information in real time about the concerns so that we can have conversations with the employees, learn from them to make it better. So my answer is do what's safest, but we're always trying to come back in-house, Steve. We're always trying to encourage our leaders to have the conversations with our people in the way that they need to have, right? Because remember, if we think about it, the three main reasons why the engagement survey was developed in the first place was to hear from employees, to identify concerns, and to improve positivity and productivity in the workplace. So if we can do that through conversations in-house, we're going to save a lot of time, a lot of money, and we're going to be able to action sooner. Thanks, Steve. I hope that was helpful. Let me know. There's another question here in the question and answer. If there is no more trust, right, that simple, practical, actionable will be implemented, how do we repair that? Well, I think by, and that's an anonymous attendee, so thank you very much for that question. If you know for sure that trust is an issue in the organization, we've got to have the conversation about it. Now, the paradox is that if you speak and you're going to have trust is even going to be compromised more, find allies, go to people in the organization that want trust to be better, right? And start small, right? We often talk about trust quite a bit. We've got webinars online on the trust paradox and building trust, but it's an issue. And the thing about the simple, practical, and actionable is what are the smallest steps that we've got to take to improve trust? Now, the other way we like to go at Brivia is when was trust better? Or where is trust better? Because we often have pockets of optimism and pockets of strength and pockets of trust, right? So check the the pocket of trust, which is where are we doing well? Where is trust not so low? Where is trust high? And where can we start building it, strengthening it, and start moving out from there versus looking at the whole organization, right? I hope that was helpful. And there's more comments and more questions in the chat. Awesome. Okay. Another question here. How do we ensure that questions being asked are unbiased? Oh, well, I would say all questions are biased, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, Wyman. There's been a number of engagement surveys that I've participated in that are obviously biased towards a particular agenda. Okay. All right. So there we go. You've actually answered that. That really does impact the practicality of it, right? If you're feeling like this isn't relatable, this isn't about me, this isn't about my work, it feels that this is, and we've heard the word propaganda sometimes. Yeah, I'd be concerned. I would honestly have a conversation about that. And we say, when in doubt, check it out, right? And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because if you're doing a survey that you feel is not about you, if you're doing a survey you feel is about something else, which might be influence or manipulation, that is a key sign. That is a key sign that trust has been breached or trust is an issue. Okay. So great question, Wyman. I think one of the things is, the M3, again, getting built to the solution that we built it so that it actually feels good, Wyman, right? We built it so that when people actually answer it, by the time they're done, and it takes under 5 minutes, they actually feel it's been about them, that they actually feel that it's relevant, and that they actually feel that something is going to happen as a result, which is why it's even more important to hear thank you. Now, great question. There's another question here. Thank you, Wyman, about the importance of data and getting as much information as possible. One of the things that we think at Brivia, one of the issues we think is happening with why the surveys have gotten so complicated has been this promise that more data will give us more answers, right? And part of the complication is there's so much data, there's so much information. But remember, big data does not mean big meaning. Right? So information that we get from many surveys, if it is not an accurate representation of the meaning or the experience of the employees, what that does is it creates tons of room for interpretation, tons of rooms for assumptions, and then the action is not only not relevant, it's not practical, it's not meaningful. and it results in people feeling like they don't matter, right? So we got to be careful that more information isn't always better, but what's better is meaningful and accurate data, or sorry, meaning about the human experience of the people that we're responsible for. Awesome, awesome. These are great questions, everybody. Anything else to add? I see there's some more in there. A pitfall is in the managers taking the data and acting on it without validating the experience of the people. I think that's a great comment. So this is also, if you're using tools or you're using your own in-house or your own third party, right? It's so important that we encourage a check-in with employees, right? Is the information that we got from them accurate? And this happens through leader conversations, right? And again, back to that question that Phil asked earlier, third party or in-house, the M3 has created our dream at Brivia, our long-term dream is that, people don't have to sit behind a keyboard, to give feedback. That actually Wyman feels comfortable, Phil or Catherine or Shelley feels comfortable to walk down the hallway to my office and say, hey, Steve, I really like this about work. We said this was going to happen. Can we make something different happen so that we feel better here at this place of work, right? So we hope that, surveys were created, just like the suggestion box, right? Now, I always bring up the suggestion box because the suggestion box is almost the perfect mechanism for feedback. It's confidential, it's specific, it's in an area where it's accessible, that people can get to it. But what we did with the suggestion box is a lot like what we're doing with employee engagement surveys. Because it's funny when you ask people, hey, we should put a suggestion box in the staff room. Most people roll their eyes or they laugh, right? Because what happened is we didn't hear back from it. It got stuffed. Or remember that time that somebody breached confidentiality, right? Awesome. So here we go. Another anonymous question. Here it is. For engagement, here we go, another question. Are objective-based questions, so example scoring 1 to 5 Likharts, preferred or subjective-based questions, question answer, so open field, or both? Great question. It's a great question. So again, it depends on what you're going for, right? Likert scales can be helpful to give you, kind of a summary or ideas of themes, right? Or they're easier to break down qualitative or quantitatively. Open field data, though, we believe is often the most helpful. However, I think an in-between, right? In-between can be helpful as well. We use a combination of Likert scales and some open field around things that they want to improve upon. Okay, we're very cautious at Brivia about the open-ended questions about dissatisfaction and where people are unhappy. That has to be done in a very careful way so that we aren't getting information that breaches confidentiality, or we're not getting information that overwhelms the people reading it. Okay, so a combination, I think. So great question. Do you do Likert scale 1 to 5, 1 to 7, 1 to 10, or do you do open-ended questions? And I think a combination of both is probably the most helpful. Okay, great question. Awesome. Anything else? I know we've got about a few minutes left. Any other questions? I see in the chat there's some action in the chat, right? And a couple of private questions. Okay. One of the things that we use at Brivia, and here's one of the tools, is that whenever you're concerned about an individual or a team or a group of people, before we interpret, because we often hear this, we'll hear people say, well, that team over there in engineering, they're like this, and that team in professional services is like this, and oh, the department of, renal is like this. We always encourage people to ask the billion-dollar question. What do you know about this performance, behavior, situation? Insert this, whatever you're concerned about, from that person's perspective or from that team's perspective. And what it does is it encourages us to let this go or go and find out about it, right? Because the answer to the billion-dollar question is always nothing. What do you know about this from a perspective? Nothing, right? So we got to move in and find out. And I think the key takeaway from this, whether you're doing Likert questions, whether you're doing open-ended questions, is that you are using a tool or a process or a structure. And I'm going to land the plane here. If there aren't any more questions or comments, I'm going to land the plane right here. Whatever approach you're using to ask those questions that we went over earlier, is this a process or an approach where our people feel like they matter? How do you find that out? We ask them. Is our process meaningful? Does it create a meaningful experience? And do they feel that it's manageable? Is it short? Is it quick? Is it regular? Does it get the results that you want? And finally, you can simplify it even more by asking, is this as simple as it can be? Is it as practical as it can be? And is it actionable? All right. So I'm going to land the plane there. I wanted to say thank you so much to all of the people that registered and all of the people that showed up to join us today. We know that engagement is important. We know that well-being, we know that, you know, optimal human functioning is important. So we can't stop asking. This is something that we've got to continue having these honest conversations about so that we can get to better and get closer to getting this thing righter. So have a great rest of the day, everybody, and a great week. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always nice to see people here. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it practical, and let's keep it actionable. Have a great day. Take care. We'll see you at the next webinar.